Yeah, thank you very much. And thanks, Peter, for the opportunity. Just to be clear, this is just my personal experience. That does not represent my employer. Actually, I took annual leave, just to be very clear. I'm biased because I use Power BI and Power Pivot before. I have a self-interest that Fabric becomes a success. For, let's say, to have like more freedom, because as a business user, like in my professional experience, sometimes I ask for stuff from IT and I don't get it. So with Fabric, like basically we have more freedom. So as long as you know how to write code, you don't need to ask anyone. It's still in preview, so a lot of detail, actually very important detail are still not there. And I guess the most important one is utilization profile. So basically when you run the SQL engine, how much compute it's using. This information will be available in October. It's still preview. I don't think it's safe to be in production. It's very useful for proof of concept and just to learn and see if it does fit. Having said that, yesterday, I've been using it for like 3 months. And because I have access to Microsoft private program, I knew about it since 2 years. And yesterday, basically, I've done the first production using Fabric. So it was quite exciting. Yeah, so I'm a Power BI user. I'm civil engineer. I started with Excel, I guess, as everyone else, and then Power Pivot, and then use Power BI for free, didn't pay Microsoft anything for 4 years, then got Power BI, and now I'm Power BI admin. I think the morality is sometimes it's good to give free stuff, because I use it for free, I don't know, 5 years, and now we're paying a lot of money for Power BI Premium. So pretty active on Twitter, and I have like a weird hobby of benchmarking database. So I've used maybe 10 different databases just for a hobby. Yeah, I think it's important before we start talking what is Fabric. I think it's like why Fabric, like why Microsoft come up with this product. And usually vendors, they don't create product just for fun. I think there are like reason and there's like historical context. Obviously, if you ask Microsoft, they will tell you a different story, but this is just my feeling. I think in the last 15 years, like the biggest innovation that happened in database is the separation of storage and compute. Unfortunately, at that time, I was building gas plant, so I wasn't really aware of what's going on. But it seems like they started with Hadoop and this big data, and then BigQuery came, and then later Snowflake. Actually, there is a joke. If you ask Snowflake, they will say they've done it first. BigQuery, they said first. So I don't know. And later, Spark arrived, and then they had this horrible table format, Hive, and they had to come up with a new table format, and they got Delta Table. Some guys from Netflix, they come up with Iceberg, and for me, that's like the biggest change in the last 15 years. If you are interested in this kind of stuff, like you can go to YouTube, and there is this guy, Professor Pavlo, and he has this amazing lecture. And they tell you like not really how to write SQL, but the history of database. Yeah, one may say, like why? Like they have Synapse, why they create new product? And again, this is just my personal experience. I like Synapse serverless a lot. For a simple reason, it's very cheap because you pay by data scanned. So when you scan like 1 terabyte, you pay $5. But imagine if your data is small and you do like filter, you can build a whole freaking solution for nothing. But there is a problem, is that serverless doesn't really write data. You can just do an export, but you cannot update or overwrite. There is another one, which is the dedicated pool. How to say it politely? Like, dedicated pool expect you to know what you're doing. So for example, let's say BigQuery, you just load data and run a query and it works. Dedicated, no, like dedicated, the first thing you need to make a decision, like what kind of distribution, and you need to fine tune. The thing is, like I know people like specialists in dedicated pool and they get like amazing performance, but they are specialists. Keep in mind, I'm just an Excel guy, so don't expect me to understand distribution or like which primary key to use or stuff like this, or if the stats are updated or not. And generally speaking, the feeling you get with Synapse, it's not really integrated. It's more like a different engine with the same, like under the same banner. So if you want to take data from Spark and read it in dedicated, you need to copy the data. So, as you can see, I'm not a huge fan of Synapse. Yeah, so I think Microsoft knew there is a problem. Like basically Microsoft was not driving the narrative. It did not generate an excitement. Yeah, probably they have like a massive market, but people don't get excited by dedicated pool. So that's why they come up with Fabric. And in Fabric, in my opinion, they've done this core decision. The biggest one is not technical. It's basically reorganization. So they took the Synapse team, and there is another team that do Data Factory, like the professional ETL. And they took Power BI, and they merged them under, it's still like separate division, but basically they report to the same manager. The second one is, it's a massive investment in Parquet. I know they use Delta Table, but the hardest one is Parquet because you need to rewrite your engine to understand Parquet and to write to Parquet. And that's like a big, I would say very bold. Personally, although I knew about the product for 2 years, I just didn't believe them because for me that's maybe even too bold, too dangerous. And the reason why is that there is no plan B. So if you take Snowflake, like they want to use Iceberg as another table format, but that's an option. So even if it doesn't work, you can go to the native. But with Fabric Data Warehouse, the native file format is Delta Table. For me, that's an interesting. The third one is Fabric Bursting. That's a new concept, which I will talk about in a second. So yeah, this is the architecture. Basically, I prefer to call it data platform. I just don't like the lake house. I think it's a language barrier. The word seems cheesy to me. But anyway, so the bottom is they like all the engines speak the same language. They all understand Delta Table. And there is like one level of security. Currently, because it's a preview, the security is not available. But the Fabric Data Warehouse can read and write Delta. Power BI can read Delta. Power BI is more like read-only engine. Spark, obviously, like it can read in any format. There is this real-time, which I don't really use, but still it can read Delta. So all the engine, they can talk to each other. Okay, there are like different approach in the industry. So some vendor, they say, we don't need multiple engine. We do one engine that do everything, which I don't think it's really realistic because database is all about trade-off. You can't have like an engine that's very good in OLAP and at the same time can do, for example, OLTP. So my feeling, my personal opinion, obviously if you ask other vendor, they will have different ideas. This approach is more interesting in that have different engine, they do like better thing at their staff, but they can talk to each other using the same storage. And again, this is not simply marketing because they have to do, for example, Power BI that don't understand Spark, don't understand Delta, and rewrite the storage layer. So there was a lot of engineering effort. The same for the data warehouse. Yeah, there is something called 64. So it's very, the pricing, it's very important. Fabric has different capacity. So it starts from F2, which has 2 capacity units. Don't try to think on number of cores. It's just like compute unit. And you have I don't know, 2000. But the number that you should care about is 64, because at 64, you get free Power BI reader. Now, my personal opinion, F64, actually one of the first feedback when we saw the product, we said, maybe change the name from F64 called F64 Premium or something. Because as far as I'm concerned, F64 Plus, it's something unique in the market. It's one product from ETL till visualization. And you pay just one bill. Having said that, the 64 is not a technical limitation, it's just commercial. So no one is holding Microsoft saying next year, I doubt it happened, but they will say, okay, you'll get free Power BI reader at 32. The license, obviously, yeah, even the license relatively is easy, but it's Microsoft, they need to make it complex. So you have the piece queue. If for people familiar with Power BI Premium, it's your more like normal Power BI Premium. It's, you buy it from Office 365. That's the one we're using at work, and that's, again, as an Excel user, that's the one I like, because it's only one bill. So it's fixed. Like the worst thing that can happen, you know, like when we talk about data warehouse, like one of the big problems is the cost and predictability. Like if someone do like silly thing and a query that's supposed to take, let's say 5 minutes, it will take 2 hours, and then you get the bill. And with Fabric, this doesn't happen. Like the worst that can happen, you get throttled, that the price is fixed. I think this is one of the selling points. So you have like multiple options. So you have the FSQ, where you can like suspend and resume. And then later, but this is not the one they're pushing for it. Later there will be reserve instance where if you made like let's say 1 year commitment, apparently you will get like a massive discount. Actually it's not public, but maybe something like 40% or something. So it's really very attractive. And they are pretty aggressive on their pricing. Bursting. For example, let's say you use Databricks and you run a query. So the first thing is you define the size. You say, I'm using this small cluster, and you run query. With Fabric, it's different. It's totally serverless. It means even if you use, let's say, the F2, which is only 2 cores, the optimizer may use more cores. If the query requires, let's say, 4 compute units, the optimizer may use that, even if you paid only for 2. But obviously, Microsoft is not charity, like you have to pay it somehow. What counts is how much usage you have at 1 day. So this is, they count on 1 day. So let's say you buy like even, that's why it's very interesting, like even with a small instance, you can do like some like crazy query and it works. But obviously it works only if you use it for a small amount, but you cannot use it like the whole day. If you use the whole day, it means you're going to use more than the total capacity. But even then, what happens, you get throttled. you will not pay more. And so cost is fixed, that's very important. There are like some technical detail, like it's not public yet. What's like the smoothing period? Is it like 24 hours? There are some stuff that they are background. For example, if you do a pipeline, because the pipeline is not interactive, so it's counted on 24 hours. If you run a query, it counts, I think, 5 minutes, but it's not. But the whole idea is, it's like, I don't know, it's the analogy. It's like renting. So as long as the total usage per day, as long as you don't abuse, and actually they may even be tolerant. If you go over the 100%, like once a day, maybe twice, they say, okay, whatever. But if you keep doing it for like a couple of hours, they say, no, there is a problem. You need to upgrade to the second. Actually, not necessarily. That's the point of this talk. Like, if you reach the 100, what you should do. For delta table, so it's that's the thing with Fabric. Just to be sure that table format is not something new. Like Snowflake had proprietary table format, and BigQuery had it before, and I'm pretty sure maybe Oracle had it in the 90s or something. But the difference is totally open, and to prove it's open, like in one of the tests, what I've done basically, I started writing from Fabric, and I started writing to Snowflake, and Snowflake just reading the data from Fabric, and it's possible because it's open format. So it's basically like even Microsoft cannot control it. But once they give you open format, you can do whatever you want. Actually, one of the guys from Microsoft was surprised. He told me, no, you're not supposed to do that. I can do whatever I want because it's open format. And there is no trick. Because our first reaction say, no, maybe there is some, they can't be so crazy and make total open format. Actually, they are. It's totally open. There is a difference is that there is the managed and unmanaged table. So, or basically the data warehouse and the lakehouse. So at work, we have this data engineer, and he's your typical Azure data engineer. Like all he work is, actually we have a joke that he worships SQL Server in secret. So he uses Azure Data Factory and SQL Server, and he's not interested at all in Delta or Open or all this nonsense. You get the data in staging, and then he starts inserting in the final table and work from that. So for him, the data warehouse table is probably the solution. And it's more, I don't know what's the word. Basically, only the SQL engine can write to that table. You have the other one, which is the lakehouse table. It's basically anyone can write. So you can use Spark, obviously, but you can use other open source software to write to it. So that depends on your background. If you are into Spark, I'm not, then the lakehouse gives you more flexibility. If you are more like SQL Server type of person, then the data warehouse table is the option to use. All right. I presume if you are a competitor, or that's like the biggest unknown. Like, how good is the Fabric data warehouse? And the thing is, because we don't have like the resource utilization yet, so I cannot compare. It's not like apple to apple. But this is just the first impression. So I'm running this TPCH SF100, which is 600 million rows. 8 table, and you run 22 queries. And this is like the second run, which is, 90 seconds. That's very fast. I would say it's even faster than Snowflake, which is something. Because in terms of speed, Snowflake is relatively standard. So it's fast, but because I don't know how much compute it's using, I can't really say it's like what's the total cost, but as a first impression, it's fast. But more importantly for me, it's and I tested nearly 10 different data warehouse, and it's the best user experience ever. It's just ridiculous. Like you just go and click and say, build it, like you just type a name and then you have your data warehouse. So like Microsoft have done really great job on this. The architecture, it's like the developer, they saw the market and say, let's pick the best part from every engine and come up with something. So the first impression, it feels more like BigQuery in the sense that the resource, it's serverless. So you don't provision the resource. It can use more or less depending on the query. There is a difference. BigQuery doesn't use SSD cache, which is a problem because, yeah, Google maybe has like an amazing network, but remote storage will be always slower. That's like physics. Fabric use local cache. So the node, like it can keep some data on the node, which is more or less like Snowflake, but at the same time, it's using open table format like Databricks. So basically, if you want to start from scratch and design data warehouse, you will come up with something like this. And I don't mean it as like they're copying, or it's basically the best of what we have currently. The second one, which is the Power BI Direct Lake mode. For Power BI user, yeah, when you work with Power BI, like you have different, either you import the data, which is the fastest way, or use direct query. And direct query is slow. It's just like you try to optimize, but at the end of the day, it's slow. Now there is a third option, which is Direct Lake, which as far as I know, it's unique in the market. Basically, Power BI does not import, but read directly from Delta table. And the way it reads, it just takes those Sparky files and load them directly into RAM, into the memory. So the first run will be obviously slower because it's talking to the remote storage, Azure ADLS Gen 2. But once the data is in RAM, then it behaves as if it was important. And it's just unbelievable. It's maybe, again, I'm Power BI user, so that's the part that impressed me the most. Yes, there is a caveat, is that keep in mind the Power BI engine, it's still pure in-memory database. It means the data has to fit in RAM. Obviously, RAM is one of the most expensive resources. So if you have like big data and it doesn't fit, then there is something called fallback to direct query, which means that the query will run using SQL, like SQL data warehouse. When I use, it's the same behavior for Google with BigQuery and BI engine, and it's very annoying. For me, the reason it's very annoying because wherever BI engine doesn't work, I have to pay. But with Fabric, it's different because it's the same pricing model. Like, I don't care. Like, the worst that may happen is the query will be slower, but you're not going to pay more. I think it's quite interesting, like the way you pay your provider can change your perception. Yeah, this is like short demo, just so all this in RAM, see, like it's very fast. The third one, it's loading the data into the RAM. So the first run, like it's slow, and you can, when I say slow, we're talking like 4 seconds. is for Power BI for second is slow. And the last one, you will get an error. Sorry. Yeah, this bug basically it was fixed. But the reason I want to show it is that when there is like big data, it will go to SQL Server, luckily to SQL Data Warehouse. And in this particular case, there was an error. So it just to show that, yes, this is like the way it works. So when the data is already in RAM, it's very fast. When the data is in remote storage, it's a bit slower when we're talking second. And if the data is too big, then it will fall back to SQL Server. And the good thing is you don't need to know this, like it just works. Because before with Power BI, if the data doesn't fit, like it doesn't work. But now, like regardless, it's 2 minutes. All right, okay. So yeah, I've done this this demo. It's Australian electricity price, and I build it. That's the point. Like I have two choices. Either you can use notebook using Spark. Again, I'm Excel user, so I won't really use Spark. Or you can use Azure Data Factory. So it's like a simple pipeline. You just get in the data every 5 minutes. And this is like the end result. And what's interesting, like, yeah, it's not particularly like groundbreaking, but the idea is that you can do like the whole pipeline just using one tool. That's, for me, that's unique. Like my reaction is, I wish I had this in 2019. Let's just skip. So yeah, if this is only some thoughts based on the users. Like if you are using Power BI Premium, then, and especially if you have like unused capacity, then it's no-brainer. Just turn it on and just play with it. If you use Databricks, because both use Delta table, then Fabric can read from Databricks. So you can keep using Databricks and for ETL and Power BI, yeah, in Fabric just for reporting. For if you have another data platform like Snowflake, I don't know. I think they need to come up with a solution. Either Snowflake learn how to export to Delta, or Microsoft learn how to read from Iceberg. But currently, there's this incompatibility. But I think eventually, like Snowflake need to learn Delta, like because of the size of Microsoft. Once Microsoft picked a format, either you liked or you hated, like you cannot ignore it. So this is like the new reality. Is if you are in Azure, Delta is the sender. Still, there is a challenge. I don't forget from where I came that I used stuff for free, and Fabric needs to work on extremely small workload. Think like student or people like using stuff for personal usage. And that's it. Okay.
Thank you, Mim.